Skip the lengthy news stories and discussions and get straight to the point with TechCrunch Industry News. It's a podcast that covers some of the biggest headlines in business and tech in just 5 minutes or less, with stories handpicked daily. Listen to TechCrunch Industry News wherever you get your podcasts. That's TechCrunch Industry News wherever you get your podcasts.
From the creators of the popular science show with millions of YouTube subscribers comes the Minute Earth podcast. Every episode of the show dives deep into a science question you might not even know you had. But once you hear the answer, you'll want to share it with everyone you know. Why do rivers curve? Why did the T-Rex have such tiny arms? And why do so many more kids need glasses now than they used to? Spoiler alert, it isn't screen time. Our team of scientists digs into the research and breaks it down into a short, entertaining explanation, jam-packed with science facts and terrible puns. Subscribe to Minute Earth wherever you like to listen.
And of course, all of this is just something bad guys would say. So we're obviously in that latter category.
Yeah. Oh, I get reminded every day that I am a demonic tool of Satan.
Yeah.
It warms the cockles
too.
of my demon-possessed heart. Hey, everybody. I'm Dan McClellan.
And I'm Dan Beecher.
And you are listening to the Data Over Dogma podcast, where we increase public access to the academic study of the Bible and religion and combat the spread of misinformation about the same. How are things, Dan Beecher?
Things are great. I'm enjoying. It's the fall season. It's an exciting time when all the pretty things die and go away, and all of the bad weather haunts us and takes over, and I try to enjoy it, but it's tricky. But it's a good time, I think, for a spooky show.
Yes, it's a good time when we're recording this for a spooky show. When anyone is listening to it, the spooky time will have passed.
Okay, fine. We are recording on Halloween.
Yes.
We both have ADHD. You can't expect us to think that far into the future so that we record a show and it comes out in a timely fashion. That's just not how we do.
I just watched Hot Ones earlier, and it's Jimmy Fallon, the episode that came out today, and it's a Halloween special. And I was like, they probably recorded this in July.
Yeah.
So I was like, they have a clue what they're doing.
Look, if we had producer money, maybe we'd be able to do this. But as of yet, we're not quite that rich. You guys haven't shared us with all of your friends, and you haven't all signed up to be patrons yet. So until that point, spooky show comes when spooky show comes, and that am now.
Yeah,
so,
we barely have production money.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but it's a fun one. We're gonna be diving into a subject that a lot of our listeners / viewers have requested. So I'm excited about it. So let's just dive right in.
Yes, let's.
So here's the thing, Dan. When we decided we were going to talk about demons on the show, here's the thing about this show. What I have learned from doing this show for a year and a half is that everything I thought I knew about the Bible is probably not right. And B, a lot of the things that you hear the most about especially from certain fringe areas of Christian or, theological study, I can dismiss it. Like, for instance, when I hear people screaming that the Bible says abortion is the murder of babies and that it's very clear on this, I know that's nonsense. And or if they say that, the Bible is anti-LGBT and you should be too, I know that that's nonsense. I'm used to thinking that when the fringes are really emphatic about something, they've probably really put a whole lot of lenses on it to get to this thing. So when I started researching demons, I was like, I wonder if that's even in the Bible. And then I went and I was like, oh, it's like, in the Bible. Holy cow. Yeah. So it's not that. It's not one of those.
Right.
It's not one of those things that's not even really there. Oh, it's there.
It's in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about why.
Okay.
But yeah, continue. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No. I mean, I think that's a great place to start. Let's just dive right in. Let's talk about why I found all kinds of New Testament demonic verses, and you're right, didn't find much or hardly anything in the Old Testament. So
just like we have some stuff that's not in the Hebrew Bible, like hell. Like if you look in the King James Version, you see hell a bunch in the Old Testament, but that's just because it's a bad translation of Sheol, a Hebrew word that does not refer to the conceptual package that indexes the English word hell. And the same is true of demon. You don't have a Hebrew word for demon in the Hebrew Bible, mainly because demon is a Greek word. Like it originates in Greek. There is no Hebrew equivalent. And it comes from, the Greek word is daemon. So it's spelled a little differently than how we use it, but demon is how it's come into English. And the word daemon really only refers to a kind of divine influence. Like it's not the word theos, which means a god, a deity, but it's used to refer to the divine influence, power, agency of deities. So divinity might be that. And it's usually used to refer in Greek literature to the kind of influence where something might suddenly happen, good or bad, and you would say that's a daimon. That's the demon. And but devoid of any kind of value judgment. We think of demon as a negative value judgment.
Yeah.
It is it's a bad thing.
It's evil. It's
right.
Yeah.
In ancient Greek, it was not. It was neutral.
Huh.
You could have a demon that made something good happen, or you could have a demon that made something bad happen. But it was this kind of faceless, nameless, just mass of divine influence. And so, like, you could also equate it with the concept of kind of a muse, somebody's individual kind of divine inspiration could be referred to that way, could be understood as a type of spirit, something like that. And so that's the word that became what we now know as demon. And it gets picked up within Greco-Roman period Judaism, primarily in the Enochic and other pseudepigraphic literature. So First Enoch, Jubilees, some other texts from Greco-Roman period Judaism are the ones that first take this word and use it to render some different Hebrew concepts, but then to develop an idea of evil spirits. And that's what gets picked up in the New Testament.
Okay.
But it's also dovetailing with Mesopotamian concepts. So none of this is native to the Hebrew Bible, but in Mesopotamia, in the Akkadian language, you have all kinds of concepts of malevolent spirits and divine entities. And to understand how they kind of organize their understanding of the divine world, you've got to understand the concept of center and periphery. So think spatially about a civilization, and this is how I think about my neighborhood. Like the really nice houses are in the center, and then you've got the starter homes, and then you've got the condos, and then beyond that you've got the apartments and the bad apartments beyond that. Like, you know, you've got these concentric rings of increasing value and importance to the society, according to the people who live at the center anyway. And anciently, they thought of the city as the center of civilization, as the pinnacle, the peak of civilization. And the further away you got from the city, the less order there was, the more disorder there was, and the less civilization was possible. And so as you get to the outskirts, you get to places that are less habitable. And then you get into the uninhabitable wilderness, and the sea and the desert are kind of the prototypical uninhabitable wildernesses where humans can't live and certainly can't build an ordered society.
Right.
So Closer to the center, more order, more civilization. Closer to the periphery, less order, less civilization, more disorder. And that's the home of all of these malevolent spirits that occupy the wilderness and dance with the devil in the pale moonlight. And so in Isaiah, you have the Lilith in Hebrew. This only occurs in reference to this prophecy about how Jerusalem would become this desolate, uninhabitable wasteland occupied only by the screech owl, I think is how the King James Version renders Lilith. But it mentions all these kind of demonic forces. And like even Azazel, if you go, that's the entity that's out in the desert that you're leading the scapegoat out to. So these disordered, malevolent entities occupy the uninhabitable wilderness. And so in Mesopotamia, they were always threatening the order of civilization. So you had to have a bunch of different ways to keep them at bay. And that was different charms and different kinds of magic that you would use. And, women during menstruation had to make sure they were doing certain things because that provides a convenient portal for some of these demons. In Egypt, you wanted to make sure they didn't come in through the ears or through the nose because those were particularly susceptible orifices as well. So this kind of
they need a physical entree into the body, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and in this time period, we don't yet have this dichotomy of material and immaterial. Everything is material in one way, shape, or form, but some things are a different kind of material and more pure.
Right.
Spirit was still material. Spirit was like analogized as wind. Like even the word ruach, spirit, means wind. And so you can feel the wind, just like you could feel spirit, but it was also something, you can't like grab the wind. You can break wind, but you can't break the wind.
Right.
And so it's impervious.
Can you paint with all the colors of the wind?
Well,
Sometimes.
see, that's a different story. No, it has no color. But and so these spirits are conceptualized as something like the wind, so they can get in you, if you're not careful. And this is kind of what gets conflated with the Greek concept of the daimon. Within Greco-Roman period Judaism. They're taking some of what they have, some of the residual Mesopotamian influence from the exile and from the Persian period, and they're mixing it with some of the Greek concepts. And we're also mixing it with some Hebrew Bible texts. So, for instance, the sons of God, they come down and they have children with the human women from Genesis 6, verses 2 through 4. That's kind of the foundation of the Enochic tradition, which then reinterprets it and expands on it and generates this narrative where they come down and they have these children who are the giants, and the giants have children who are the Nephilim, and the spirits of the deceased Nephilim are the evil spirits that then become the demons. And so
interesting.
So
okay.
According to one narrative, there are a bunch of different narratives, but that's kind of,
and that doesn't seem to match up with the narrative that I got from multiple sources in my research about sort of the origin story of the demons.
Okay.
But I don't know. I guess we can just talk about that. I found in a few places where it would say that demons are, and this one uses 2 Peter as its reference point for this, but it says demons are angels that sinned, and rebelled against God, and so they are destined for hell, and they're going to torment as many of us as they can before they have to go there, or something along those lines.
Yeah, so there we have the idea of these angels. So in the Enochic tradition, and we see this primarily in Jubilees, the angels, they're created on the first day, and they watch the rest of creation, and they're the Muppet babies, just kind of like, hey, everything's great, and but then when you get the story of them descending, because they're just way too horny. that then leads to all this bad stuff. So they fall, and then you've got these named angels who are doing all this bad stuff. And then in Enoch, God is like tells the other angels like Gabriel and Michael and these others is like, go bind them under the earth for 70 years of years, and and so they are imprisoned and they're bound, and this is where we get the development of concepts of hell. It's originally for the angels. So the disobedient angels are also another kind of conceptual template that dovetails in with the idea of demons.
So that's from Enoch. That idea comes, like, what's fascinating to me about this, one of the fascinating things is that, like, most of Christianity rejects the Book of Enoch as scripture currently.
Yes.
But it's very
most of
clear.
Christianity is also descended from the Book of Enoch.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's so clear how powerful the influence of that book has been when you look at, the stuff that makes it into the New Testament. It is like it references it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's concepts of the devil, concepts of hell, concepts of heaven. It's all there.
So the 2 Peter verse that I was talking about that was referenced in that article that I was reading is 2 Peter 2, verse 4, which says, "For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of deepest darkness to be kept until the judgment." And I didn't know where that came from, but I guess it's an Enoch thing.
Yeah. And you have, so that's a reference to Enoch. In like the book of Jude, you have a direct quotation from Enoch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And here in Enoch chapter 19, "And Uriel said to me, there stand the angels who mingled with the women, and their spirits, having assumed many forms, bring destruction on men, and lead them astray to sacrifice to demons as to gods until the day of the great judgment, in which they will be judged with finality. And the wives of the transgressing angels will become sirens." So this narrative is an opportunity to take all these loose threads and weave them together into this tapestry that becomes the backdrop of the development of Christianity. But actually, this reminds me, I want to focus on something, because it says, "led them astray to sacrifice to demons as to gods," meaning as if to gods. And this is actually this is quoting, this is paraphrasing Deuteronomy 32:17. And this is a very influential text in the development of the concept of demons, because Deuteronomy 32 is the Song of Moses. It went triple platinum. I think Pharrell probably ripped it off at some point or another, but I'm just kidding. I have nothing against Pharrell. But it says here it's talking about Israel in the wilderness, things they did wrong, things they sinned on. And it says they sacrificed to Shedim. And that's a Hebrew word that probably is related to an Aramaic word, Shadain, which is like a class of deity. And we see it in an inscription that was discovered called the Deir Allah inscription, which mentions Balaam. But that's probably a kind of secondary class of deities. And it says they sacrificed to Shedim, not to God, gods they did not know, to newly arrived ones whom your ancestors had not feared. And so this is condemning the Israelites because they were sacrificing to other gods, and it calls them Shedim. And this might be, in fact, I think it's probably related to the root from which we get Shaddai. El Shaddai. I probably shouldn't sing that. But so it's probably related to God's title, Shaddai, which may come from this specific class of deity. But when it came time to translate that into Greek for the Septuagint, they didn't really have an equivalent for shadim, and I think shadim probably occurs in maybe like 2 or 3 other passages in the Hebrew Bible. Let me see. Yeah, it looks like it occurs also in Psalms 106:37. They sacrifice their sons and their daughters to shadim. And they chose daimon to translate shadim, which meant that these, and there's an argument to make that it's probably because we don't know what kind of deities they are. They're just these nameless, faceless deities. Oh, well, daemon means kind of a nameless, faceless divine power. It's this undifferentiated mass of divinity. And so, that makes perfect sense. Let's go with that. But then the daemon becomes the object of false worship. It becomes false gods. It becomes wicked deities,
right.
And that plays into the development of the Enochic tradition and jubilees and stuff like that. And so, by the time of the New Testament, all of this is coming together. And who is it that they sacrifice to? Oh, they sacrifice to demons. And so, when you look in most English translations of the Bible now, because the Septuagint rendered daimoniis for shedim, they sacrifice to demons, not God. That's the NRSV UE. They sacrifice unto devils, not God. That's the King James Version. New English translation, they sacrifice to demons, not God. So now we have demons in the Old Testament because of the Greek translation. And so we're building this construction of demons going all the way back.
Yeah, but that's a case of backfilling, right? Like that's not that's unlikely that's the newer concept of demon is what is meant with the shadim concept.
Yes. The whatever shadim was intended to mean when that was composed in Hebrew, that has been overlaid with the much later concept of the demon. So yeah, it is altering what's going on there. But most English translations are just content to say, yeah, we'll just use demons. Whatever. Who cares?
Hey, listen, it is getting into fall here. The leaves are turning, but it's also getting colder. It's getting a little bit darker, and it's we're getting into cold season and flu season. And I gotta say, it's harder to feel healthy this time of year, for me anyway. I feel like I'm running on fumes a lot of the time, and it just can be tricky to keep that energy up.
And that's why I take Field of Greens. It's whole organic fruits and vegetables, no extracts, no lab-made stuff. Just 1 scoop a day gives you simple, real nutrition. And Field of Greens feeds your body with fruits and vegetables medically chosen to support your heart, your vital organs, and your immune system.
Yeah, listen, people are getting a steady stream of energy throughout the day with Field of Greens. They're not experiencing the afternoon crashes that they normally do. You can get better sleep. Even, people's stomach feels better when they're just taking their daily Field of Greens. Field of Greens is my go-to for getting the nutrients I need, even on one of those bad eating days. Now, the other nice thing about Field of Greens, you're going to get a money-back guarantee. I'm positive you're going to enjoy Field of Greens, but if you don't, you can return it for a full refund.
And we've got you 15% off your first order as well as free rush shipping. So visit fieldofgreens.com and use promo code DOGMA. That's promo code DOGMA at fieldofgreens.com. Fieldofgreens.com. So it's almost sweater weather, which pairs perfectly with savory fall foods, but it also means that the year for me is getting as busy as it ever will be. And so the thing that I dislike the most about when my schedule gets crammed is having to plan and then prepare food. And that's where Factor comes in. Their chefs do the shopping and the chopping. To bring you fresh, never frozen, fully cooked meals right to your doorstep. All you have to do is heat them up and enjoy. All their meals are dietitian approved, so you know you're getting the nutrition you need along with the fall flavors that you crave.
Oh, yeah. When it comes to meals, here's what I want. I want options. I want variety. I want different. So That's why Factor offers 35 wholesome meals every week, including Gourmet Plus, Keto, Calorie Smart, Vegan and Veggie. You're going to find something that fits your lifestyle, that fits your palate, and that will make you a happy little camper like it makes me.
So this fall, you've got a lot going on outside of the kitchen. I know I do. Keep your plans. Turn to Factor for your food. They deliver fresh, nutritious, chef-prepared meals ready to eat in just 2 minutes.
So head over to factormeals.com/dogma50 and use code dogma50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's code dogma50 at factormeals.com/dogma50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. Let's move then to the New Testament and talk about what that idea is. What is, like, do we have a sense? I know it's like demons are mentioned plenty of times in the New Testament and almost casually in a bunch of ways. I'm thinking now of Luke 8, where in verse 2, it says, and Luke 8 has another demon thing, but in verse 2, it's talking about how Jesus was sort of walking and he was accompanied by a bunch of people. And verse 2 says, as well as some women who had been cured of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, it feels so like thrown, just sort of cast out. Oh, and then Mary, and boy, she had 7 of them, but they got rid of those. It's no problem.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel like that. Like, we don't hear that story. It's just like a side note that, like, also she had a whole bunch, but we got rid of those.
Well, there was probably a tradition that was in circulation back when Luke was, or at least the author of Luke was gathering their sources, and so it's a throwaway line. It's referring to something that people at that time period would have known, but obviously that story's been lost to us. But yeah, it is kind of that's the world they lived in. It was a demon haunted world. Where, because, the wind blows and, it might give you an earache, it might go up your nose, you might, swallow a mosquito or something like that, and you might have a demon get in there, and that might make you sick. If you feel depressed, maybe that's a demon. Like that, they were attributing an awful lot of different things to demonic possession, including mental health issues and other pathologies, I'm sure, that we don't know about.
I think that's the thing, right? Like I was going to get to that later on, but it definitely seems like, no, it's fine. Like, it definitely seems like what a lot of this is just explanations for things that we now know are caused by entirely other things, for mental health issues or for, disease or whatever. It seems like if someone just starts vomiting ferociously out of the blue, before there's germ theory, it's like, I don't know, probably a demon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like what else, what other explanation are you going to have? If someone's if someone is having a psychotic break, you're not going to be like, oh, there's probably something wrong with their brain, or maybe they've had whatever. They're going to immediately jump to there's something external affecting them.
Yeah, and I think we all have kind of an internal anti-contamination system that's kind of intuitively built in. And, it's kind of why people hate the smell of flatulence, anybody else's anyway, because intuitively it's kind of like, this is harmful. And it's not, but we all have that internal contamination system that is compelling you to perceive certain things to be harmful. And there can be, sometimes it has to do with food. Sometimes it has to do with actions. There is a sexual disgust sensitivity is a part of that. People think certain sex can be contaminating. And so when you have that's sitting so close to the surface because they don't have better explanations for what's going on, and they're not really thinking scientifically according to how we understand the term. And in other words, they don't have enough information for their reflective cognition to overrule the intuitive side of things. The intuitive side of things gets to drive, and that is going to because of the proximity to these other ideas about a demon-haunted world, the gravitational pull is just going to be too great. And so your internal contamination detection system is going to very easily connect things you're afraid of and things that you might perceive to be the outcome of contamination to align with the notion that there are demons everywhere around us.
And that they get inside of you. Like, that's the other thing is that, if you go further down in Luke chapter 8, you get to a guy, in Matthew it's two guys, who's living in the tombs and who is possessed by demons, who is what we would call possessed. Somebody's actually living inside of him, or a bunch of somebodies, as it turns out. Talk about that. Where did that come from? And this is the guy, just so we get the story. The broad strokes are this guy is a crazy hermit guy, lives out in the wilderness-ish, I guess.
Or at least on the outskirts. It's if there are tombs, this is on the outskirts, which, again, you overlay that center periphery idea. And it's like he doesn't belong in civilized society. He's got to occupy the outskirts.
And anyway, Jesus approaches him, and he cries out and fell down before him, shouting, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit, that's singular, to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the wilds. So he was like amazing, crazy strong, and would break the bonds, whatever they tied him up with. Jesus then asked, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. And legion in this case is that it's capitalized as though it's a proper name, but then legion does mean a troop or whatever. Right. So what are we talking about with that?
Well,
he understand.
He asks what his name is.
Yeah,
and he says legion, but yeah, the idea is just the demon is identifying as a multiplicity of demons. So it's not just one demon, because the number shifts. Right. Asks what his name is, and then he says legion, because many demons had entered into him, and I think the daimonia, as soon as he says that, it shifts to the plural. That's a neuter nominative plural. Had entered into him, and then it says where's the NRSV? They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss, is what the NRSV. And so it's back to the plural. And so the idea is, upon first glance, this is a single demon, and Jesus is like, "Oh yeah, we take care of this all the time. I can do this on a weekend." But then it's like, "Oh no, it's a bunch of them."
It's a bunch of them, and for whatever reason, I guess when they get cast out of the guy, they have to go back to the abyss if they can't find another place to be. And they beg Jesus. That's so weird that the demons are like, "Please, just put us in the pigs. Will you put us in the pigs? We would love that." It's not Jesus like, I condemn you to pig life. They're asking for it, and Jesus is like, "Yeah, go ahead. It's all right."
Well, and it's it's fitting, Because what kind of demons are they or spirits are they? They're unclean. What is a pig? It's unclean. And so it's they're drawn to a more natural habitat, and this is why the demons are shoving the guy out into what did you say what is the King James said?
I'm in
they're driven him into the wilderness or driven him into the wilds.
Into the wilds is NRSVUE,
and the word there in I lost my place. It's eremos, the wilderness, because that's where demons are located.
Yeah,
at the outside in the periphery.
So when they were in the man, they were making the man run out, go to the wilderness, go to their habitat.
Yeah. So like think Stranger Things.
Yeah.
He doesn't like what is it that he doesn't like? He doesn't like the hot. He likes the cold. And so, he wants to crank up the air, and then you drive him out by making it all hot. And so it's the same idea. This is kind of a very intuitive, natural notion, and it comes from the very natural and intuitive notion of possession, which is something that you find in all kinds of societies around the world and throughout time. This notion that, and I've talked about this a little bit, it's in my book, where the human body is conceptualized as a container. We have an inside, we have an outside, and the inside is where executive control is located. And because we have these unseen agents all around us, for good, for bad, or sometimes they can be neutral, and that's why you want to make sure your orifices are all taken care of, either through your apotropaic amulets or whatever spells or whatever you have that keeps them out, so they can't get in. Because if they get in, then that's where your executive function is located, and they can take it over.
Right.
And so demon possession or spirit possession is something that is phenomenally widespread, trans-culturally, trans-historically. It's just something that we find all over the world. And this is just the first century CE Greco-Roman Jewish manifestation of spirit possession. Only these spirits are unclean. And then, prophecy is a product of spirit possession as well. Only the clean
good
spirit
side
of God. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that, but that's really interesting. So yes, I mean, people talk about, I guess I had thought about it because when I was researching for this, I did stumble on a video that was like, don't worry though, demons can't get into us good Christians because we're already filled with the Spirit of God. Well, that's possession, right? Like that's basically the opposite side of this coin, which is, yes, we're already we've it's good possession, but we're already filled up. There's no room for legion in here.
Yeah, well, and you've got this metaphor. There's another part where they talk about the person's body as a house, and you've got the strong man who, and I'm forgetting precisely what the metaphor is, which is embarrassing. But you've got to tie him up, and you've got to sweep out all the unclean stuff. And so, yeah, it's this is just a function of this perfectly natural side effect of human cognition, is that we understand ourselves to be containers that can sometimes be taken over. And you look at the possession of Saul. When Samuel says to Saul that God's Spirit is going to, usually the translation says something like overtake or overcome you or something like that, but the Hebrew root is salah, which means penetrate. God's Spirit is going to penetrate you non-sexually, or maybe it is sexually, and it says will give you a new heart, and that's how you will be anointed king. Is you'll have a new heart. And so because the heart is conceptualized as the seat of cognition that is located internal to you. And so we think of the seat of cognition as the brain now. And so, we're going to switch brains, and then, that changes who's in charge. For them, it was the heart. God's Spirit is going to, possess you, take you over, change out your own heart for a new one that belongs to God. And so it's the same thing, only we like this kind of possession.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Can I just bring up a silly side fact and just have you answer it for me really quickly? You had mentioned that it makes sense that the legion is cast into the swine because unclean goes into these unclean animals, but the swine herd, that herd of swine was owned by a person who was taking care of them and was presumably kind of upset that his whole livelihood was then stampeded into the lake and drown.
Yeah.
So there must have been people who were eating pigs at that time.
Otherwise, they're not in a Jewish dominant territory right now.
Oh, okay.
They're to the east of the Sea of Galilee. Now, there's a traditional location for this that's right on the shore, but depending on which manuscript you look at, it has different names for this location where they are. And when we've tried to locate places that went by that name in the first century, they're like miles away. So it's like the pigs didn't just run off a cliff or down a hill. They would have been like, "Are we there yet? Shut up!" And yeah, the idea is that they've they drive the man out into the wilderness, and they're just like, let's get these pigs somewhere, and they just who knows, accidentally or intentionally drive them into the water and kill them, and they're just desserts. And when it says abyss, the word there, the Greek is abyss, but this is the netherworld. This is where the wicked angels, the evil spirits, were being kept. So basically, we need to occupy these humans, or we're going to go back to the chains and the darkness where we await judgment. That is mentioned in the Enochic tradition, and then is picked up within the New Testament. So basically, this is our, we're out here joyriding, so that we don't have to, and that's keeping us out of jail.
Right.
So we want to be joyriding even if we have to get in the pigmobile. And then, we're going to...
And then the pigs immediately drown, presumably depriving them of their mobile.
Yeah,
and
presumably
they go back to the abyss anyway.
Yeah.
I just wanted to provide the coda of that story, which I find hilarious, which is that the swineherds run back and tell everybody in the town what happened, and they're like, "Hey, Jesus, would you please leave? We're uncomfortable with everything.
Yeah.
We would like you to please go."
Quite the buzzkill.
You killed all this dude's... Yeah, you helped that one guy, but then all this dude's pigs are now dead. That's just not nice.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just don't have the time or energy to sit through a 50-minute podcast about business models and tech. Luckily, there's a quicker way to get the updates you need to succeed. TechCrunch Industry News is a podcast that details some of the most noteworthy headlines in business and tech, all in 5 minutes or less. Want to hear what Google is up to? Or maybe Tesla just released plans for a new out-of-this-world vehicle? Or did you hear about that robot that can help make production easier and safer? You'll hear stories like these and more in quick, bite-sized pieces. Check it out. Listen to TechCrunch Industry News wherever you get your podcasts. That's TechCrunch Industry News, wherever you get your podcasts.
Sick of those trivia podcasts that you don't even understand how to operate and they just have too many levers and buttons?
There's got to be a better way.
Now there is, with Good Job Brain, an offbeat quiz show and trivia podcast that makes learning new things easy and fun.
I just learned that artificial vanilla flavoring sometimes comes from the anal glands of a beaver, and now I can never shake that mental image. Thanks, Good Job Brain.
Good Job Brain is available for the low price of just 4 easy payments of free. It's a podcast.
Good Job Brain is part of Airwave Media and available on all podcast apps. Operators are standing by.
So let's talk a bit about how demons how they were meant to affect people, because we talked about the possibility, or what I would deem the likelihood, that this demonic possession was just an etiology or a way of explaining just, various health/mental health afflictions.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of like what they were explaining, what things were happening to people?
Yeah, we've got a few different things that are explained as demon possession, where Jesus heals people by casting the demon out, as if it was simply a mechanical issue.
Right.
That, oh, here's your problem. You got this demon. Let me just get. Okay, there we go. So like in Matthew 9, verse 32 starts, after they had gone away, a demon-possessed man who was mute was brought to him. Okay. And when the demon had been cast out, the one who had been mute spoke, and the crowds were amazed and said, never has anything like this been seen in Israel. So he's making the deaf to hear, the mute to speak, and a lot of this is attributed to his authority over demons. And so this is a way to signal that he has this power over demons, and can just, boom, you're healed. The demon is gone. See there, he's got away. And presumably they go to the abyss or whatever. But then in verse 34 it says, but the Pharisees were saying, by the ruler of demons he casts out the demons. And this comes up later where they accuse him again of casting out demons by Beelzebul, which is
meaning he's summoning the power of Big Daddy Demon.
Yeah, like this is all just a grift. He's just like, they're in league together, and he's like, I've got to cast you out so I can dupe them into thinking that I have power over you. Yes, sir. And so that's the accusation that they're making, and then Jesus gives the famous a house divided against itself cannot stand. How can I cast out demons by the Prince of Demons? Which was great movie. Kevin Costner. No, that was Prince of Thieves. Never mind. And I love and Beelzebul is an interesting story. So Beelzebub is how most people are used to hearing that.
Yeah,
and that's probably how a lot of translations actually of the New Testament render it. But the Greek is Beelzebul or Baalzebul, and that's because it is based on the Northwest Semitic storm deity Baal. And the title would have been Zevul Baal. That's a title that we know from the Ugaritic literature, which just means Prince Baal or Prince Lord. Okay. But they've altered it. Beelzebub means Lord of Flies. Right. So it's a way to make fun. It's like the pejorative nicknames that certain presidential candidates give people that give him trouble. It's just a way to mock and deride. Yeah. But that's one example of a pathology or a condition or a disability that is attributed to demonic possession. There's another one in Matthew 15:22. Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he didn't answer her, and this is where we get, it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. And she says, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." The very problematic xenophobic dismissal of the Syrophoenician woman, and he basically says, "Woman, great is your faith," and then from that hour, her daughter was healed. And elsewhere, we have them describe this as scratching oneself and not being able to walk and all this kind of stuff. So obviously severe mental health issues are also being attributed to demon possession.
Yeah, I feel like it's funny because I think a lot of people might think that it's harmless these ideas are just interesting, but who are they hurt? It's not hurting anyone, but so many. This is still talked about today. I saw lots of videos in my research and found lots of examples of people who were saying, there was a recent, I don't remember what state. There's a candidate for office in one of the in a Midwestern state somewhere, I think, who's a pastor, and a video just resurfaced of him saying mental illness is just demon possession.
Yeah.
And the treatment, and don't take your kid who's suffering to a doctor when what they need is a priest who's willing to do an exorcism. That's sort of idea. And it's just that means the people who need help aren't getting available help. There is available help and they're not getting it. And B, it also sort of oddly puts the blame onto the victim. The person experiencing really difficult things is suddenly blamed for it. Like they weren't spiritual enough. They weren't filled enough with the Spirit of God. And thus they allowed this demon inside of them, and it's their own fault. Mm-hmm. And I think both of those two ideas combined, the exorcism is actually on the rise currently as a performed religious rite, and that freaks me out.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot more folks on Twitter talking about exorcism as the go-to fix for problems, particularly for children. Yeah, I'm seeing it a lot associated with people's kids. They're like, don't take them to a doctor; they'll pump them full of drugs, and then they'll turn trans. So you need to take them to an exorcist. And I've even had some self-proclaimed exorcists tell me, "Oh, this is real. This is totally real." That's phenomenally harmful. People die because of that kind of thing.
Or experience just massive loads of trauma that they will have to unpack for the rest of their lives because they were a child and they were told that they were possessed by a demon.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to wrap your head around as a, 8-year-old or whatever.
No, it's horrifying that kind of thing continues to, the kids are conditioned to think that way, because I mentioned that this is kind of a natural, intuitive way of thinking about contamination and stuff like that. When you don't have enough education for your reflective cognition to overrule those intuitions, we have plenty of that now. But if you are conditioned, you can actually condition your intuitive cognition to then overrule the reflective cognition. And that's what happens when you're raised to believe these things and taught that if you don't believe these things, that is the influence of demons, and that is unrighteous, and that is what is going to ensure that you don't make the rapture, or that you're going to go to hell. And so it creates this internal war between the reflective and the intuitive cognition. And it allows all of the progress that humanity has made in treating preventable diseases, disability, all of these conditions, so that they are on the rise. It's basically an anti-vax position on things that are not vaccinated.
How many times did we hear demonic discussions in relation to COVID, like in relation to, instead of go out and get the vaccine and, there was like a bunch of the anti-vax sort of rhetoric was centered on religious reasons why this was coming to pass, this pandemic was happening. And so if there is a spiritual cause, then the only cure that's available must also therefore be spiritual.
Yeah.
I think that's I guess what I'm getting at, because I'm in no way trying to talk people out of believing out of their Bible beliefs. But I think it's really important to point out that as this idea of demonic possession was very clearly a New Testament innovation. It was something that didn't exist throughout the
at least
hundreds of years of the Old Testament.
Yeah, at least the identification of these things as demons. There was certainly the notion of spirit possession, and in other societies they certainly also had those ideas. That's why you have these magical texts from Mesopotamia and Egypt. There's like, here's the spell to get rid of the demon that's clogging up your your uterus or whatever. So they certainly had that. But yeah, it's not. There are no demons in the Old Testament. That's
and the idea, so to me, the idea isn't like you have to give up your belief in like, this shouldn't shake someone's faith if they, if they want to keep believing. What it should do is at very least make people think this is one explanation for a series of issues.
Yeah.
We have better, we've had 2,000 years to come up with much better explanations for those things. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that, that the Bible is wrong, but it was wrong about this. You know what I mean? Like, that mute guy wasn't possessed by a devil. It wasn't possessed by a demon.
Yeah. And the story is a literary creation. Jesus did not heal a mute person. This is just a way for them to have Jesus fulfilling the prophecies that existed or were thought to exist at the time regarding the coming of the Messiah.
Well, now you've gone too far.
I wanted to bring up one final thing. I wanted to talk about a way that Bible translation uses demons for the sake of colonialism.
Yes. All right.
There's this really cool paper that I came across while I was doing research on demons. It was for my book, but it was dovetailing with stuff I was doing at work. And
wait, do you mean your book, The Bible Says So?
No, my previous book, but The Bible Says So is my forthcoming book, available
now for pre-order.
Yes, pre-order at the link that we have in my link tree, and also
in the show notes of this and every upcoming episode. So
yes. But I read this fascinating paper because I was looking at cultural imperialism and colonialism and this kind of stuff as it related to Bible translation. And there are not a bunch, but there are some really good books on this. One's called Translating the Message, that is about translations of the Bible and colonialism and stuff. But there's this wonderful scholar, Musa Dube, who wrote a paper called Consuming a Colonial Cultural Bomb, translating Badimo into demons in the Setswana Bible. And what this is about is the fact that when they were translating the Bible into Setswana back in the 19th century, they chose a specific word to render the word demon in the New Testament. Now, in Setswana, they had a word for evil spirits. They didn't use that word. They chose badimo, and I may not have the accentuation right. That may be badimo. I'm not positive. But that was a word that refers to benevolent ancestral spirits that helped people, that inspired people, that they sought out for divinatory purposes and all different kinds of things like that, for healing and stuff like that. And so the argument is that the choice to render badimo was based on the desire to eliminate the influence of the benevolent ancestral spirits from this community of Botswana or Setswana speakers. So,
sort of a poison pill to go back and degrade their old concepts and their old religious practice.
So, exactly that. A way to try to use the Bible translation as a tool of extracting these unwanted cultural residues that they thought were not consistent with Christianity. And the problem is it didn't work. because their traditions associated with the Badimo were too strong. And so rather than understand the Badimo as evil spirits, they understood the Bible and these references to the Badimo as another instrument for facilitating the aid of the Badimo. And so they would use the Bible translation as like spells, as incantations in order to invoke the Badimo. And they understood that Jesus was kind of a facilitator of accessing the Badimo. And so the Bible translation became a tool of divination associated with the Badimo, because and there's this theory of host guest ideas of translation, where the target culture is the host and the translation is the guest, and basically the host took over, appropriated the little poison pill that the guest was trying to bring in. And so I think it's a wonderful it's a wonderful illustration of how Bible, something as ostensibly benign as Bible translation, can be a tool for cultural imperialism, but also how it can go sideways if if you don't get it right. And
one wonders if they read the story of the demons being cast into pigs and started to like try to communicate with their ancestors through pigs after that.
I'm trying to see if they do talk about that. That was so they use Badimo in that part where or he sends them into the pigs. Okay, so no, it doesn't tell, or she doesn't give any examples that use that particular story. But yeah, they do use the Bible as kind of an icon, as a bit of an idol in that regard, to facilitate the access to the Badimo. I think that's
that's a heartwarming moment for me. You know, when the ancestral thing, when the thing that's trying to be subsumed then does the subsuming, that's kind of fun.
Yeah. And there are all kinds of examples of using vernacular translation for the sake of cultural imperialism, particularly in Africa, with Portuguese languages, for instance, as well as in places like the Philippines and elsewhere. So yeah, it's a messy business, surprisingly enough, but it's
not surprising at all. So I guess one of the takeaways for me on this is just that if you were raised with demon fear, and I think so many people were raised with a lot of fear of demons and sort of, the other side. Now the rhetoric is all political too. You see people like Lance Wallnow talking about how Kamala Harris is demon possessed and using demon magic to get where she is and all of this stuff. And I think we can release it. I think we can safely, gently release the demon fears back into the wild, cast them into a pig. Go find yourself,
or allow them to sail into the abyss.
Yeah, cast them back into the abyss, because you don't need that anxiety in your life. Yeah. It's not that's not what they were meant for, and it's certainly not useful for you.
And it's such a pathetic way to try to cut off thoughtful discourse as well. To just frame someone as demonic. It's dehumanizing. It's a thought-stopping cliche. It reduces everything to this zero-sum binary game where there are good guys and there are bad guys, and there's nothing in between. And
right.
That is such a corrosive, destructive way to look at the world.
And of course, all of this is just something bad guys would say. So we're obviously in that latter category.
Yeah. Oh, I get reminded every day that I am a demonic tool of Satan.
Yeah.
It warms the cockles of my demon possessed heart.
Well, if your cockles have been warmed and you would like to become a part of keeping this show going, we'd love to invite you to become one of our patrons if you can afford it. Go over to patreon.com/Data Over Dogma and throw a few shekels our way. We would certainly appreciate that. You could get access to an early and ad-free version of every show, and the after party, which is extra content that we make just for our $10 a month and up patrons. Also, if you'd like to reach out to us, it's contact@dataoverdogmapod.com. Thanks so much. I hope your demons do well this week, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye, everybody.
Data Over Dogma is a member of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. It is a production of Data Over Dogma Media, LLC, copyright 2024, all rights reserved.